unboxing the Birmingham Museum. I'm your host, Caitlin Donnelly, and each week we go into another storage area here at the Birmingham Museum, and we start opening up boxes and taking a look at what's inside. No one employee of the Birmingham Museum has opened up every single box because we have hundreds of thousands of items here at the museum that have been taken in for decades now. And so, it's always a fun surprise to go into places and just see what's there. So this week I am in our archives room, back upstairs at the Allen House. And this room, when the Allen House was a wedding and banquet venue, this was the bride's dressing room / bathroom. So we still have the fans installed in the ceiling. Every once in a while I accidentally hit them when I'm walking in. It's very loud. But here we have a lot of our paper archives and documents. So for a while, we are slowly transferring everything onto, our server, which has a lot of information on it. But for a while, we were storing so much of what we had in just envelopes and filing cabinets. So I am standing here in front of our 4 filing cabinets, and these have our paper records in it. So sometimes people will call or email or ask on social media. They'll ask a question about a person, a business, a family, and whenever we say, give me a couple seconds, I need to go check the archives, we're first checking our digital archives, but we're also coming in here and checking our paper copies because not everything has made it over to digital quite yet. So a lot of times what we're doing in those couple minutes is actually walking this room, opening up a filing cabinet, and looking for the appropriate folder. So we have everything from records of Birmingham, the city of Birmingham, like offices and departments, businesses that were in town, families, historic districts, statues, neighboring communities, information on, say, like Bloomfield and all that, and also schools and everything like that. So that is kind of the bulk of what we have in here. We also have filing cabinets for maps and architectural drawings and things like that. That is the storage system over here. So sometimes people will come in and ask for information about a house they live in, or they're buying, or they're selling. And sometimes we do have good records on that. Sometimes we can actually tell you who lived in the house before. Sometimes we might have the blueprints. Sometimes we don't. So if you have come in here asking for that information and we don't have anything, we often will follow up by asking you to donate something, and that way we can start a file on your house. And for, maybe in 100 years, someone walks in and wants information on that address, and then we'll have it for them, courtesy of you. So we also have our cream collection stored in this room. Everything that's not currently on exhibit downstairs is in this room. And we also have a photo scanner here as well. A couple of years ago, we got a grant to buy a really nice photo scanner to scan our postcards that were in our collection and make them available to the public. So we got through a good chunk of those, but it's also really nice to be able to scan photographs in very high quality and have those available as well. So really excited about that. But you know what? Why not just go into one of these folders and I can show you some of the stuff that we have. So I'm going to go into the schools file because I think you can find like really interesting information there on, different classes or buildings that don't exist anymore. So I love that myself. Oh, and here's a nice thick file, and it is on the Hill School. So we talked a little bit about this in a previous Live at the Birmingham Museum video that we did. Hill School was among one of the first 1st through 12th grade schools purpose-built in Birmingham. Before the Hill School was built, in order to get a high school education, you would have had to pay tuition and go to the academy. So obviously that meant that if you didn't have the funds to pay your way to the academy, higher education was off limits to you. So this was a public school. Everyone in Birmingham had the opportunity to go and get their high school education in an era where not a lot of people did that. It wasn't seen as required like it is today. But a lot of people went on to do that from Birmingham, and then a lot of them went on to college education as well, which was becoming more and more standard throughout the 1900s, latter 1800s, for professions like doctors and lawyers and things of that nature. So actually, there's a story about the academy, which was run by a minister in town named Samuel Hill. And the story goes that when his students applied to the University of Michigan, that they were able to get in without having to take an entrance exam like every other student, because the board at the University of Michigan realized that his education that he was giving these students was of the best quality, and so they were just kind of went through the system very, very quickly without having to do a lot of the other things that other prospective students would have had to do. And this tradition continued. When the Hill School was built, it was first named Union School, then named after Sam Hill by a lot of the students and citizens in the village. They wanted to recognize what he had done for the students of Birmingham. And so a lot of students from the Hill School went on to the U of M, and that kind of continues today. A lot of students who graduate from both Seaholm and Groves, decide to pursue further education at the University of Michigan. So a lot of people sometimes ask, they'll come across people in our archives that we're talking about, and they're like, wow, it seems like a lot of people from Birmingham went to the University of Michigan. And part of that is that tradition that dates all the way back to the mid-1800s. So pretty cool. So let's look at some of the things that we have here in the file for Hill School. We do have some photos. We're trying to kind of weed those out and store them slightly better than a folder, but for a while this was the best that we had. So sometimes random things end up in these files. I found like transcripts and stuff that probably should be stored elsewhere, but hey, you know what? You live, you learn, you catch your mistakes as you go, right? So, this picture was right on top. This is Birmingham High School 1909. And I'm going to say, just from the way the young men seem to be posed, that it is a football team. But if you look close, there's like a little Boston Terrier right there. And I like to think that he was the coach. And on the back, it just says location unknown. So they're not sure what field this was here in town where this was taken. And here we have a photo of all the students from 1900. So as you can see, decent sized student body for 1900. So I like to try to tell which kids were like the troublemakers and stuff. Sometimes if you have a photo with the teachers in them, you can see which student the teacher is giving like the sit down and shut up face to. And I love that. Having been one of those kids myself, where my elementary school teachers were always getting after me for talking all the time or moving constantly or touching things, I just like to say I'm sorry to any of my former teachers watching this, but it worked out. I'm now a somewhat well-adjusted adult, so thanks. And we do have some photos of when the Hill School was torn down. So the Hill School was built in 1869 and it was torn down in 1969. After it stopped becoming a school with classrooms and students in it, the district did use it as like an administrative building for a little bit, but in 1969 they decided that the building was too outdated to keep around. So they did tear it down, so we do have some pictures of that here in this folder. And this is a great photo. This is a panoramic shot of the Birmingham School's 1916. So from 1900 to 1916, you can really see the difference. The student body exploded. Around the early 1900s, Birmingham was going through a little bit of a building boom that would slow down a little bit once America entered the Great Depression and pick right back up afterwards. So during these years, I mean, the student body was expanding, and that's because the population of the village of Birmingham was expanding, but also there were students in the Hill School that were coming from other outside communities as well, because perhaps their community didn't have a high school. So a lot of those students would pay tuition, or their town would pay tuition to Birmingham Public Schools so that their students could come here and learn. So a lot of this is indeed the population of Birmingham picking up, but also other places in the area were picking up too. And parents in those areas were realizing that Birmingham education was where it was at, and they wanted that for their kids. And this is a fun little document. This is a souvenir of Birmingham Union School. Once again, the old name for the school before they named it after Samuel Hill. And from 1903 to 1904. And it looks like this is kind of like a yearbook. So it has a greeting in the beginning. It has the list of the closing exercises for the year. And it lists the Board of Education, and a couple of these names, if you are familiar with anything else that we've done at the museum, you might recognize some of those names. So the president of the Board of Education was J. Allen Bigelow, our Civil War veteran who led a very colorful life. Jaybert Peabody of the Peabody family was the secretary, and there was a W.E. McClellan, treasurer. A.S. Adams, Adams School is named after him, and John H. Snow. And it looks like they have the core of instructors, and we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 teachers total for all these students at the school. And then we've also got the listings for each class and how many students were in each class. So the senior year they had 16 pupils total, and their motto, their class motto was "From possibility to reality." And this is, you kind of see this huge sense of optimism always at the turn of the century. Even in the year 2000, a lot of people were concerned about Y2K and everything, but there was also just this huge sense of optimism. Like, look how far we've come in the past 100 years. Like, what's going to happen next? Like, what new exciting changes in technology are going to happen? Like, are my grandkids' lives going to be significantly different from my own, just in the way that they interact with the world? And in the 1900s, you had that same thing going on. There were so many new technologies coming to market, so many new ways to communicate with the outside world. I mean, you could communicate with, friends and family when they were traveling. So it was it was an exciting time to be alive, and I think their senior year motto really reflects that. The junior class had 15 students, and their motto was, "The sail is set, where is the shore?" Sophomores, 16 in that class, and their motto was rowing, not drifting. So there was a nautical theme in the junior and sophomore class. The freshman class had 40 students in it, and their motto was, "Not for school, but for life we learn," which is something, my teachers were always trying to impart to me too, and some of it sunk in. And on each of these pages too, you'll note there is an asterisk next to some of their names, and those denote the students who did not live in Birmingham. So once again, they were coming in from outside communities to attend high school. So the 8th grade class had 36 students. The 4th grade class had 35. The 2nd grade class had 31. And there were 27 students in the 1st grade class. So you can kind of see that Birmingham was growing at that time. The lower grades had a lot more students in it, and that could be partly because maybe there were new families moving in with young students, but also because at this time, once again, it wasn't required for you to go on to high school. You could drop out of school or leave school at an earlier grade and still be able to make a good living for yourself. So a lot of students, particularly if they didn't come from a very wealthy family, sometimes they would do that and leave school early to work on the family farm or to work in a shop. So there's a couple different things going on right there. All right, so now we're gonna go on and look at something in our cream collection, and this is one of my favorite parts of this room.